Marcus Garvey. Marcus Garvey was one of the most influential figures among black people in the diaspora during the 20th century. Between 1916 and 21, he built the largest black movement in black history at the time. Marcus Garvey was born on St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica in August 1887 in a small town in the northern part of Jamaica. His father had been a slave and often liked being alone as he internalized his feelings and felt that the world was against him. So Marcus grew up mostly around his mother, who wanted more for him and steered him towards reading and education. As a boy, he spent more time reading and dreaming of giving speeches to large crowds. It was at the age of 14 that he became aware of his race and what it meant in Jamaica. At that age, he became a printer's apprentice and learned the power of the published word. So in 1914, he read Up From Slavery, which was a very defining moment in his life because the book explained to him the issues faced by black people everywhere. It was at that point that he decided he would unify black people and become their leader. He met his wife Ashwood while she was delivering a speech, and he immediately felt like she was the woman for him because of her passion in her speech. They began a very long and tumultuous relationship. Garvey founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, modeled on Booker T. Washington's Tuskegee Institute. And Marcus Garvey was a great visionary, but his management skills may have left a few questions. In the spring of 1916, Garvey left for Harlem, New York, and upon arriving in New York, he found a place to stay with a Jamaican family and then started working for a printer again. At that time, his goal was to still build the institute in Jamaica, and he felt that coming to New York would give him an opportunity to raise money for that purpose. His first opportunity to give a speech was organized by A. Philip Randolph, and even though the speech did not go as well as he planned, he was able to redeem himself. He continued to tour at least 38 states in the United States and raised money for his Jamaican Institute. But on his tour, he experienced for himself the life and the plight of the black man in America. So on July 2nd, 1917, hundreds of people were killed in the East St. Louis riots, and W.E.B. Du Bois, at the time leader of the NAACP, called for a silent march. However, Garvey immediately seized the opportunity because he felt it was not the right time to be silent. He described the current black leaders as weak and subservient. Garvey believed black people everywhere lacked unity, which led him to open his first United Negro Improvement Association UNIA office in the U.S. Garvey preached that blacks had a glorious past, other than what they'd been led to believe. He helped to change the perception of Africa from the untamed jungle into something that was part of black heritage and something to be cherished. As a result, he attracted thousands of black people, and his Sunday meetings were half political rallies and half religious revivals. Families would spend the day being inspired and listening to his words. He often taught the pride in African history and that the salvation of the black race was in organizational unity. Garvey was so inspiring that he made black people see the physical beauty in themselves. In a sense, he helped to build their self-esteem. And any black person who would join the UNIA for 35 cents as long as they were of African descent. As part of their membership, the black people received a uniform which became a symbol of pride and unity. The UNIA was divided into 4 sectors. Women and the youth had their own sectors as well. And in the summer of 1918, Garvey decided to start promoting black business and started the Negro World newspaper and the Negro Factories Corporation. The UNIA businesses at their peak employed about 1,000 people in Harlem, and often Garvey appointed inexperienced people to run the organizations. It is believed that he valued loyalty over competence. As a result, some of his businesses did not do as well as they could have, which left investors disgruntled, including one who shot himself in front of the UNIA offices. So by the end of 1919, Garvey had about 750,000 followers, and he quickly became a target of the US government. The message of Africa for the Africans also quickly made him a target of the Europeans who had colonized most of Africa at that point, especially the British. He constantly declared that Africa was for the Africans, and the UNIA was in 22 countries, and copies of the Negro World newspaper were often smuggled into countries like Kenya, where young boys would use them to disseminate messages to different villages. As a result, the U.S. Justice Department picked a young J. Edgar Hoover to find a way to get rid of Marcus Garvey. Hoover hired the first full-time black agent to infiltrate the UNIA. Meanwhile, Garvey unveiled his latest project, which was to develop a shipping line to cater to black people's travel and for the movement of goods, as black people were often treated as second-class citizens. His black shipping company was called the Black Star Line. He believed black people could have their own economy and the shipping line would move goods from different countries to increase black commerce. In order to finance the shipping company, Garvey sold shares and within months dumbfounded his critics with the purchase of the first ship, which was to be named the SS Frederick Douglass. Later, he discovered that the captain of the ship and the advisors had betrayed him and led him to purchase the ship for 6 times its true worth. In Garvey's personal life, he married Ashwood after only 4 months, but only after 4 months they were separated. It is said he often resembled the characteristics of his father and liked to be alone. He rarely spoke except when it was about UNIA business. Meanwhile, the UNI took in thousands of dollars every day, and on August 1st, 1920, he held the International Convention of the Negro of the World in Madison Square Garden. Over 25,000 delegates came from different countries to represent their constituents. It was at this convention that Marcus Garvey proclaimed himself Provisional President of Africa and announced the Black Declaration of Rights, which called for human rights for the black race. Marcus Garvey was at the time the head of the largest black movement, and other black leaders such as A. Philip Randall and W. E. B. Du Bois believed he was a destructive force to black people. Du Bois even called him the most dangerous person to black people. It was the criticism of other black leaders that offered the basis for the U.S. government to step up surveillance, and 8 federal agencies began working on his case, making every effort to destroy his movement. The agent hired by Hoover quickly gained access into the UNIA and became a close confidant. And by 1921, the Black Star Line was nearing bankruptcy, and Garvey decided to sell stock to raise money for another ship. But he, however, made the mistake of using a Photoshop picture that made it seem like he had already purchased the ship. So the US government went after him for federal mail fraud, knowing that their ultimate aim was to deport him. Stubborn Garvey fired his attorney, represented himself in court, and did not do very well. Ultimately, his conviction was based on 1 letter and for defrauding that person of $25. So in February of 1925, Marcus Garvey was convicted and sentenced to 5 years. However, on November 18, 1927, after only 2 years and 9 months in prison, he was pardoned by President Coolidge, who had him deported immediately to Jamaica from the port in New Orleans. He resettled in Jamaica with his wife, Amy Jack. However, the American court confiscated all his property in the U.S. and Jamaica, and it forced him to file for bankruptcy. His followers in the U.S. quickly dwindled, as one could even lose their job if their employer found out they were a member of the UNIA. Garvey decided to move to the United Kingdom, where he suffered a stroke on January of 1940. After reading a story from a U.S. newspaper proclaiming that he had died, he suffered yet another stroke and died on June 10, 1940.